Hey, and welcome to week 2, part 2, student-generated text for signs and symbols, enhancing science instruction through literacy in the MCCS era. We hope you enjoyed the video of the physics classroom and that it provided a little bit of transition from the idea of a working scientist as a writer and as a reader to the idea of the student as a science writer. We often hear from teachers that students in their classes don't have the writing skills they need to produce scientific writing. Often this is followed with a statement about how science teachers don't feel that they're writing teachers. So how can science teachers support students in becoming writers of scientific text? This is something that looks a little bit different at different grade levels, and so we're going to get into some more specific information about what expectations should look like for different age students next week when we dive into the Common Core standards. For now, I want to focus on 5 suggestions from an article by Catherine McNeil and Joe Krajcik titled Instructional Strategies to Support Students Writing Scientific Explanations. And if you're interested in looking at the whole article, there's a link at the bottom of the page that would take you there. The first of their 5 strategies is to make the framework explicit. And I almost changed the word framework there so that we don't get it confused with the framework for K-12 science education that we're going to talk a lot about. But the framework that they're talking about here is that writing framework of claims, evidence, and reasoning that we use in science writing. And it's really important, the big idea of making the framework explicit is that it's important that we don't assume our students are going to figure this out or that they already know how to do this. Sometimes we get students who've come from a great teacher that did learn how to do this, but it's not something that just comes naturally to kids. They do need some support in understanding claims, evidence, and reasoning, and teachers need to directly scaffold and instruct around that framework for scientific writing. We need to make sure that we're teaching that, not just teaching science. The second strategy is modeling and critiquing explanations. We need to give students examples of science writing, both good and bad examples. By working through a poor example and modeling the process of improving it, students can learn a great deal about how they can generate their own good writing. And we'll talk a lot more about modeling when we get to social cognitive theory, but modeling and critiquing and looking at sample explanations and talking about what's good and bad is really important. The third strategy is providing a rationale for creating these explanations. Like many things in life, we engage in processes more when we really and truly understand their value. This strategy is exactly why we started this week with how scientists used writing in section 1. And then we provided you with extra resources to learn more about how scientists use writing if you don't have personal experience with it. I believe that understanding how this works for scientists and why they need literacy skills to be able to do their work will help all of us as science teachers to prioritize the process of adding that into our classroom, the same way that helping our students understand how others are going to use their reasoning or how others are going to repeat their work and need the steps in their procedure to be clear, or how others might build off their conclusions to have a new experiment, or how others might challenge their assumptions. That all of those things, understanding how their writing is going to be used, helps them to engage more meaningfully in the process of creating the writing. The fourth strategy is connecting to everyday explanations. The reality is that claims, evidence, and reasoning, that format, is really just a formal version of something we do every day. We could all come up with a bunch of examples for the way that we use this today, even if it's first thing in the morning. I'm sure we all have done some version of claims, evidence, and reasoning already today. Students can do this as well. So helping them understand how they're doing this, helping them connect to those similar processes in their daily lives, really allows them to hone their skills, make connections, and improve their process in the context of science. The fifth strategy is assessing and providing feedback to students. This is such a key step. On the one hand, we assess because we're using this as evidence of student learning of science. That claims, evidence, reasoning structure is telling me whether or not the student understands the concept itself. But also it's giving us an opportunity to provide feedback and allow them to engage in the process of learning and improving, both about the content and about the writing. And so we're going to actually talk a little bit about kind of assessing and giving feedback on both levels. in the context just of the scientific reasoning. Do I have a claim and evidence and some reasoning? And then also that bigger question about writing more generally. So this this rubric comes out of that same paper, and this is the rubric that they use as their exemplar for that fifth component of evaluation. And they're talking in their paper very specifically about evaluating the claims, evidence, and reasoning, not talking about evaluating the whole package. So this is their rubric, and you can see that they have for each of the components, the claim, the evidence, and the reasoning. They have a level 0, 1, and 2. With the claim, a 0 does not make a claim, makes an inaccurate claim, all the way up to makes an accurate and complete claim. And then doesn't provide evidence or only provides inappropriate evidence, something that doesn't support the claim, up to provides appropriate and sufficient evidence to support their claim, and then does not provide reasoning or only provides reasoning that doesn't link the evidence to the claim, up to provides reasoning that links the evidence to the claim and includes appropriate and sufficient scientific principles. And that's that piece where we really, when we make these claims and we engage in this reasoning, we need to be seeing the science come out in that. So I think that this is a great rubric for teachers to get started with. Many of the science teachers who I know that I've talked to about evaluating student writing, to start off with something like this, where really we're very much still tied to the science. We're not branching out into that bigger question of evaluating writing yet. This is a great starter rubric for that. This week you're going to have two things that you're going to look at in terms of reading for this section. There's one more thing in the digital section. The first thing in this section is this article called Getting Fast Just Because, Teaching Writing in Science Class. And it addresses the claims, evidence, and reasoning part, but then it also addresses that bigger question of writing more generally and provides a much more comprehensive rubric. And it also provides some information about scaffolding the process of student writing, kind of in a more detailed way than those 5 suggestions did. The other thing that I would like you to look at is this website called the Journal of Emerging Investigators. And this journal is a pretty amazing thing. It's a peer-reviewed process, and I believe that in this case of peer review, we have a little loose definition of peer. I believe the reviewers are graduate students, while the authors are all middle school and high school students. And so if you teach middle school and high school students, you could use this. You can have your students submitting to it, but you also can use it as examples for them of what great writing looks like. But I would like you, I'm not going to pick any specific thing for you to look at. I'd like you to pick 1 or 2 things that just look interesting to you and take some time to look at the writing and think about how that would apply to your students in your classroom. Enjoy!